once you define reality, then everything that you observe within reality has to point back to that definition. If it doesn't point back to that definition, then you should probably revise your definition.
Hey, sorry, I can hear now. If so I'm here to field questions that anybody has in response to the debate. But if somebody doesn't have them, then my wife is really eager for us to spend some time together because we haven't seen each other all day. But I can stay here till 9:30 and field questions.
That's yeah. So Chris, how do you feel? Well, no, scrap that. We don't deal with feelings here. What do you think about TJump's point that reality is real? Do you think that provides a solid grounding for his worldview? That tautology?
No, I don't, because to me, I very much got the impression that he said it tautologically when it was convenient for him, and he said it logically when that was convenient for him. I didn't feel like there was very much consistency from him on that point. Because if it's merely tautological, I don't see how you get to the next step. There has to be some degree of entailment. But if there is a degree of entailment, then I feel I just don't think I can back down on this point, that it implies some sort of logic in an ontological sense that can't just be arbitrarily assumed at the head of a worldview.
Okay. So when you say he was inconsistent on that, would you say he's inconsistent in how he's presenting his points, or are you saying he's inconsistent in his worldview, or both? I think the answer to this is going to be both.
Yeah, I do think it's both, because at some points it seemed like he wanted to distinguish thinking and existing, or thinking and experience, and at other points it seems like he didn't want to distinguish them, and so I saw where I was trying to critique the idea of logic. He wanted to state it as a tautology, which is formally distinct from the cogito ergo sum, I think. Because I don't think I don't think something can be tautological and have ergo in it, which is a logical connecting word. But when I was pressing him on how he, in fact, got from one point to the other point, so these different steps in the construction of the worldview that he bases upon the cogito ergo sum, he wanted to logically distinguish them from one another, which removes its ability to be tautological. And I think both of those have problems philosophically and make the worldview inconsistent.
Okay. So when you guys diverged into the topic of knowledge, do you think that TJump's distinction that he gave definitionally between belief and knowledge is a rational one? Rational in terms of, do you think that there's a meaningful distinction to be made between the two, and that you can explain how those words apply to his ontology / epistemology?
Yeah, so I very strongly feel that there's a difference between belief and knowledge. So so a belief is something that you just hold to. It could be literally anything.
Right. It's subjective, right? Whereas knowledge is trying to approach something objectively.
Yeah, exactly. And so I didn't see for myself. Can you ask your question again? I lost my train of thought.
So do you think that during the debate, if you remember, do you think that TJump's moment where he distinguished between the two, what belief and knowledge was, do you think that those definitions are in accordance with reality? right? Do you think that
Yeah.
those
So
definitions aren't
can you,
just
can you remind me of the definitions you gave?
I think you said that a that knowledge is a justified true belief. So it has to be like a truth apt claim, something that can be either true or false, but that there is a justification for that conviction.
Yeah, so I think we agreed on the definition of knowledge, just not as what properly constitutes justification.
Okay, I see.
So and I don't think that's necessarily he seemed to wanting to be reducing that to a definition of justification. I wouldn't say it's just a definition of justification. I was mostly saying as regards to what sufficiently constitutes justification, and revelation is so foundational to what's needed for knowledge to be the case that justification will necessarily have to refer to revelation when when we're speaking in an ultimate sense.
Okay. Um I found the aliens part kind of interesting, but I couldn't fully get to it because I was eating. So can you explain what he was trying to say?
Yeah. So as best as I could tell, he was trying to say that I have no basis with it. This is the best interpretation, and he seemed to agree to this. But he also said there's more to it. Um, I need to go and watch the debate again tomorrow. Which, by the way, just as a point of complaint, I don't know why, but no audio went to my stream on YouTube. All of my viewers were complaining. So that was really unfortunate. Um, but he seemed to be saying that I have no justification for distinguishing whether or not my belief that the revelation is actually from God is illusion.
Okay.
Yeah. So he was saying
So
it could be the case, and you can't tell whether or not it is, that the revelation that you have didn't actually come from God, but instead came from aliens implanting this within you.
no, so I think there's a better way of approaching that. I think it I obviously it's a hypothetical, right? That's
Uh-huh.
what he meant by supposition. But I would even try to approach that differently. So um, it could just be that um, even if you know that you exist right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if you think you know that you exist right now, you have a strong conviction that you exist right now.
Mm-hmm.
There might exist some other experience that allows you to experience reality in a more truthful way than you do here. So, what I'm trying to say is, um, since our senses are limited, right? Even if you can derive, you said the term was objective revelation, right?
Right.
Granted, even if that's true, um, there could still be a part of our sensory perception, and there probably is. I think there is uh, that impedes you from knowing something more profound that God revealed in the Bible, but that you don't sufficiently understand. So what I'm trying to say is that God revealed
That's definitely
Himself in the
not
Bible,
that's
right?
definitely not what Tom was saying. But I hear you.
Yeah. So I'm bringing a different hypothetical in Tom. So what I'm saying is, you have this experience, and you had it through interpreting the Bible, and and you hold that the Bible is the revelation of the Christian God. What I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying is in order to have certainty, uh, for objective, you call it objective revelation.
Right.
The experience you have would have to be the best of all possible experiences. So when I mean best, I mean the most optimal towards understanding the truth about God. Now, you would say that God created us in a way whereas we can't fully understand his nature. That's what you said yesterday, that even even if we try to make a compelling explanation for God, we don't have like the full the full tools to understand him.
Yeah. Hey, Brian, or Grandmaster. What can I call you?
Either one. I mean, I'm not Brian, Grandmaster, Grand,
Sure. Yeah. So I do want to.
hot chick in the PFP. You could call me whatever.
So I do want to have this conversation with you, but um, I have a responsibility to be a good husband to my wife. She wants me back at 9:30. I'm going to do that for her. So I do want to field other questions from other people if other people have them. But if not, we can continue chatting for the rest of the 4 minutes.
Okay. Well,
So does anybody
let's
else have
see.
any questions?
Yeah.
Um,
I guess that's no.
yeah.
As silence. Here's the thing. I don't like to think that silence implies no, right? But we take it as if it is, right? So there's no questions. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry,
All
I was
right.
reading
See you,
something.
Chris.
Yeah. Do you wanna
Have a nice night. Yeah, we
chat
could
about
talk
this?
whenever you're available. I'm pretty much free until Sunday.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we'll. It might have to be on Sunday because I'm booked all day tomorrow. But
Okay.
yeah.
Take
Well,
care.
all right. Yeah. Bye.
I should have asked him if he believed the cogito needed some sort of grounding. Like, do you get what I'm saying?
Um, no, because I know what his answer is going to be. So the cogito for him is going to imply some statement about ontology when it's not. It's just a statement about one's experience. So this is like a point that a gazillion people think that they understand, but they don't understand. The cogito is just trying to say um, that because I think, that entails that I exist. That's literally what it means. And in order to think, it implies that beforehand you had to exist. There's no such thing as a thinking, non existing thing. That's impossible. That's not a statement that reveals anything about ontology, right? Descartes thought it was. Descartes hold the cogito ergo sum, and he used that to try to prove idealism, and that was false. I mean, the objection was not so far as the statement itself, but he was using the statement to justify idealism just through that statement alone. Um, and like Thomas said before, the cogito ergo sum will still hold no matter if materialism is true, no matter if idealism is true, no matter what ontology you subscribe to, it still holds. The statement, I think, therefore I am, still justifies my existence through uh, reason, through the use of reason, thinking. I'm going to ask him is He holds that the Bible is the revealing source of the Christian God, but he also claims certainty. But I'm I'm trying to say is that how can he arrive at certainty if he also posits that the God that created him with a finite mind that has just a teeny tiny amount of information that he could have access to. I mean, um, obviously, if the Christian God were true, then holy shit. I mean, if epistemologically speaking, we are pretty impotent because uh, our approaches to how we arrive at truth are not only going to differ. I mean, that kind of explains why there's a gazillion religions and why they can't all seem to agree as to what the right conception is. But that's a side point. It's that if an omnipotent God exists, then that entails that the experience that we're having right now of reality is the best of all possible experiences that could have. So there's basically no limitations uh, for how we can interpret and know with certainty what the Christian God is. But there obviously exist those barriers, right? Because of our finitude. So how can you claim certainty of something that transcends your finitude when you yourself are finite? I mean, this is like the point that someone has made towards Darth Dawkins. Um, that granted, he makes all these claims and he thinks that he's got it all figured out, but um, he clearly innately has an inability to do that, right? Because he's not omniscient, right? He doesn't have all the possible information in existence in order to verify um, that something transcendental exists. Uh, and it's really hard for precepts because precepts, first of all, they're wrong. They're wrong in thinking that reason can't come from matter alone. It can, right? And saying that it couldn't would be like um, to not take the consideration of reason being an emergent property of the brain seriously, or consciousness being an emergent property of the brain seriously. Um, I don't think there is a basis to say that rationality was even created. I think that ultimately his worldview dismantles once you observe the possibility of rationality emerging through nature alone. And when I mean nature, I mean non natural causes. Like there could be an evolutionary explanation as to how consciousness emerged in the property as a property of our brains, excuse me. Uh, there could be an explanation as to why our cognitive faculties are reliable to an extent. There could be an evolutionary account for many of these things. So, just the fact that there could be a possibility for how to ground rationality in a godless world makes me skeptical of their claim that it's impossible to account for, they call it the preconditions for knowledge in an atheist framework. Because I just demonstrated to you two possibilities. You have an evolutionary argument as to why our cognitive faculties are reliable. And number two, how rationality could be an emergent property. Doesn't need to be created by something that has divine rationality. Those are spots that naturalism could fill in just fine. Just like naturalism has done with everything else. We've figured out how uh, how depression emerges as a chemical imbalance in the brain. We've discovered um, how humans are driven primarily by self-interest. We've discovered many things about our biology um, through without God. I don't see how this would be any different. Uh, so that's all I wanted to say to him is that if he believes in objective revelation, then there'd have to be a type of experience that we have that it be almost merely infallible to the point where believing that God does not exist would be nonsensical. But he is still yet to prove why it's nonsensical to believe in God's non-existence.
I had something simple I wanted to ask, basically, to the group here. Is I have a much more simple observation to make of that. He defines objective revelation, and then claims there is an impossibility to the contrary. In my, I don't even know how he could make a claim on something like that and claim that it's impossible, though. Like specifically whenever he's saying things like God has revealed this to me, it's like, well, how do you know that your God is not a deceiver? Like things like that. And he may like say that, if God is a deceiver, then I have been deceived or something like that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly how to answer it. And I'm sure it's probably a fairly simple observation.
So when he says impossible to the contrary, when he says those words, don't take any claim about God's existence seriously. Because if a statement does not have both the option of true and the option of false, then the statement can't be appropriately called truth apt. Right?
Well, yeah. It just feels like impossibility to the contrary is just a statement they've thrown in there to seem as if it's like a big caveat.
He's positing an unfalsifiable position. If you're saying it's impossible to the contrary, clearly it's not impossible to the contrary. I mean, like I just said before, there could be like, to use his language, there could be an ontological grounding for rationality without God. I just gave one. It doesn't have to be, because when he says ontological, he's using it synonymous interchangeably with metaphysical, right? So for him, it has to come from God. Anything that we know of in the material world has to come from the immaterial. Or for him, he would call it vicious circularity. What I'm saying is that's not needed. You don't. You can make a perfectly fine account for the explanation of human reason without God. The cogito maybe would be one of them. But there are good reasons to believe that our rationality emerged through matter, right? And matter is something non-rational. But he thinks that rationality can't come from non-rational causes. It's like that argument from Reason I posted 2 weeks ago by C.S. Lewis, where he says, like, if naturalism were true, then yada yada yada, human reason can be explained by rational causes. Human reason cannot be explained under rational causes in the naturalist view, therefore the naturalist view must be false. It's modus tollens. So if P then Q, not Q, therefore P. I forget like the exact wording of it, but the structure is modus ponens. I don't buy that shit. Because that's it appears to me when these precepts say like the atheists have no justification for where knowledge comes from, therefore God, that's an argument from silence.
Yeah,
The
it
lack
seems
of
like their arguments,
justification. Yeah, the lack of justification for something doesn't prove the alternative to be correct. The justification isn't here now, but it could be in the future.
it seems
So
like that. I was just gonna say, it seems like a long time ago, I used to have a lot of issues trying to understand what they were exactly saying. And it just seems like it comes down every time to this: is that you don't have an explanation for something, I have an explanation for something, but that seems like a deceitful and dishonest way to argue, like, as it is it not? Like, it just seems like it's just like, I have a possible explanation, it is the ultimate explanation, therefore it is. Like, it just seems really dishonest.
the only thing that he's proving is that his worldview has more explanations for things than my worldview. Okay, so what? Quantity does not equal truth. You having more explanation for things, such as knowledge, does not equate to your worldview being the fundamental truth about reality. I mean, I can offer probably more explanations for you as to how a video game works, right? But you're a video gamist, so you're not in the realm of video games. So it's like absurd to ask a video gamist to provide a justification for how video games work. That's the same thing here. The atheists deny the metaphysical by definition. We don't believe in a God or in any God. God is a metaphysical being. So it doesn't matter if we have no metaphysical justifications for things. We don't even hold that subject seriously. Well, not to the extent as the theists do, but that's besides the point. It's like asking whether a moral nihilist can provide a justification for why killing someone is objectively wrong. No, the nihilist doesn't believe in objective morality to begin with, and the atheist doesn't believe that there's a metaphysical grounding for knowledge. You can know it epistemically alone. You don't need that jump from ontology to epistemology. That's my point. It's it's not a defeater of atheism, because the question, can atheism account for the preconditions of knowledge ontologically? The answer is obvious, no. Yeah, so what? That's the whole point of atheism. I don't posit the metaphysical. I don't. It's not my concern to delve into ontology. So it's an argument that goes nowhere. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that pretty much explained what I was. That pretty much put words to what I was feeling.
Yeah, have you watched the debate with Godless and TJump over? Well, there's like two. I think it was the second one where it's like Um, uh,
Can
yeah,
Tom know anything?
godless girl versus TJump on emotivism, something like that, some shit like that, and um, godless godless came up with this like unfalsifiable definition as to what subjective means. So to use her language, she said that something subjective is mind dependent. So it's contingent on a mind. It's contingent on, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. But I mean, so then you win automatically because there could you can never discover such a thing as a mind independent moral value, right? The values need to be formed by the mind first, and then if the values ultimately depend on the mind ontologically, then that entails epistemically that no, there's no such thing as a moral statement being true regardless if all minds cease to exist tomorrow. That's incoherent. So yeah, she wins by that definition, but that's like a nonsensical definition that you can't falsify that. There's no such thing as a mind independent moral value. So that's why during the debate I was like, well then give TJump a better definition as to what subjective means, and that might prove your moral subjectivism. Precepts kind of argue in the same style because they come up with this standard that's metaphysical, and they argue against the atheist, and the atheist um, doesn't even accept the metaphysical, doesn't accept the ontology of God, since TJump doesn't believe in a God. So why it just seems like a useless debate topic. Why not debate better whether the cosmological argument proves God or something like that? That's way better because it's not top down, it's actually bottom up. So the kind of reasoning Chris was using is that every justification you could give for the existence of knowledge leads back to God. So he's already assuming God before he can make any claims about where knowledge comes from. Whereas I would prefer a type of debate where it's the Kalam, and um, they work their way down towards proving the existence of God, uh, evidentially. Just saying the topic doesn't make sense to me. I don't. And I mean, T Jump should be tired of this kind of like debate style. I mean, he debated a Chris is nice, but Foxy isn't, and I think should argue against like a non-precept. That'd be interesting, something new.
You just asked me if I had somebody set up for next week, so if you guys can find anybody who's on a precept who wants to argue against T Jump or wants to like debate him, you gotta please let me know.
I know one. I could Frank. I could like DM you. I think it's someone in the dialectic might be interesting. That Cartesian I was talking about.
Yeah, just DM me.
Um, yeah, I don't think he's a precept. I'm gonna have to ask him, but he doesn't seem like the precept type. And
So
plus, he,
I do
he
need
he's a
to.
theist and he holds the cogito, so it'd be like interesting to see an atheist and a theist debate the cogito. and whether that leads to God or not. That'd be interesting.
I was gonna uh, say to you, Franks, that I want to start inviting more people in, but I think the biggest problem for me is figuring out a way that I do that in which it doesn't seem as if I am impeding on other people's servers, if that makes sense. So, like, how do you normally go about doing that?
Well, I do usually just go in there, and when they're quiet, and they're not talking or conversating, I just say, hey, is anyone interested in debating TJump or having conversations with atheists? Or I just go about it that way. I don't like because that I mean that's the only way you can get some of these people to come in. It's just asking them straight up, like, hey, do you want to debate or do you want to come in? So I mean, don't feel like you're bothering them or anything, because a lot of people do want to debate. Like Foxy was down for it, so you know.
Okay, yeah, I'll do what I can. Then on that end, I have some servers I can message. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, the only thing I would refrain from doing is just randomly messaging people. Like, hey, can do you want to debate this or that? Like, I tried
I
that.
get those all the time.
Yeah, I tried that with Jay Dyer, and I got kicked out of his server. So that's the only reason why I'm telling you not to do it, so you don't get kicked out.
All right, yeah, I got you. Yeah, I want to make sure that I do as much as I can, and in a way that doesn't come off as if I'm like just spamming the chat or anything like that. Because I feel like being a moderator of the server, I have a way to a kind of an obligation to also represent it. You know what I mean?
Is Jay Dyer even on Discord anymore? Is that server that he has, is that like still working? I thought that got yeeted out.
I'm not sure if it works
All
or
right, I'm
not.
gonna hop out, y'all.
All right, I'm not sure if it works or not, but all I know is I'm not there anymore. So it is what it is.
If Dyer were to debate me, I'd do the Darth Dawkins top down approach on him. It'd be pretty funny because I know that's his style as well. He's very similar to Darth Dawkins in the way he like tries to corner people and try to humiliate them. So if he tries that on me, you can pretty sure I'll try it on him. I'm not a pacifist about debate styles. If they're aggressive, I'm going to be aggressive on them. Because the aggressive style that Dyer and Dawkins have is to make the atheists look ridiculous.
Hey, Grandmaster, what do you think about when they say, we know this because God has made it in a way where it's impossible for us not to know it? Like, have you heard that line before?
Yeah, I heard that, and that's ridiculous. Number one, why not? I mean, God is omnipotent, so he has the ability to create any possible world that can be conceived of. So I can conceive of a world where I could know things in a better way that I know them now. I could live in a world where I'm omniscient, right? And I can have the full justification for whether or not God exists. But I don't live in such a world, right? So if I don't live in such a world, but yet I can imagine alternatives to this world that they say it's created, then that claim that it's impossible is false on its face.
So, Levi, did you watch the debate?
No, I didn't.
You did not, or you didn't?
I did not.
Oh, you did not. Oh, yeah. He
I
was.
think it's kind of repetitive. I mean, I watched like 7 minutes, but um, as you said before, it's kind of repetitive that TJump is giving the same arguments, and most of his opponents do not even. I don't think they really listen, or they are too. How do you say that in English? Invested in their own arguments,
Mm.
and it's basically arguing about in one point he said it's more than a feeling. When Tijam said, how can we differentiate what you feel is no different than what a schizophrenic feels, and that's where I stopped watching.
I do agree it's repetitive, and I do agree that the conversation didn't go anywhere, literally, because I was expecting the same arguments before the debate. I was expecting T Jump to say the same thing, and I was expecting Chris to say the same thing. It's not a knock on those guys. I'm not insulting them or attacking them for that.
Yeah, sure.
It's just the same thing. It's like John Wick. Before watching John Wick, I know he's gonna kill like 95 people in the movie plus. So yeah, it's predictable.
Yeah, it's almost like any other red soup debate.
Yeah.
Just changing the time and the person, but I agree it's almost identical to other debates.
Yeah, it's identical to almost all the debates he's had with presuppositionalists or any
Yeah.
debate titled with name here, comma, reasons for God, question mark. All those type of videos have the same arguments. What I would like to see is um, if T Jump were to debate a theist, I want to see him debate some cosmological argument. That'd be interesting. Someone
But
that
he has
holds a
said,
cosmological argument.
he has said that he has somewhat refuted this argument
The
by
cosmological?
saying, by saying that it's not necessarily. Um, Let me get this right. There's no reason for us to claim that it is a mind, but it can be just an emergent property of the universe, and meaning
Yeah,
that
I think he said before that. Yeah, even granting that there's a first cause,
yeah
the first cause doesn't have to be fundamentally mental. So, for
yeah
example, it could be a quantum field like amplitohedron, and that's spaceless, timeless, and immaterial, but it doesn't have a mind. But yet, matter can emerge from that quantum field alone.
yeah that's right, and we shouldn't assume that it is a mind or that it has mind-like properties. So if there is a debate of that kind, I will assume that that will be his first argument. Maybe.
I do agree with him because the notion, like, obviously the theists are arriving it intuitively, so they can't imagine um the beginning of the universe without some conscious planning going on. right?
Yeah.
But so I could contend that and say, well, the waves in the ocean don't move because they're conscious. A tsunami does not do what it does and have the ability to literally destroy entire cities because it's conscious. It still functions, it still does its natural function at being a natural disaster. And but it's so it functions in a way that's non-conscious, right? But that natural function does not come from a thing that is conscious. We know why waves do what they do, right? And how tides arise at night, right?
Yeah.
It's not God who sets them; it's the moon.
Yeah, there's no reason for us to ascribe a purpose or a mind behind it.
Yeah, and here's the other thing about God. If God is so God is immaterial, right? If God is immaterial, then he has no parts, and if he has no parts, then he has no corporeality, right? He has no like body. If he has no body, then how can he be the creator of language? Because language works in a way that it would entail that there's some physical substance um, behind the use of language, right? So it's like it's impossible to think of a mind where it just conceives of language, right? But it has no body to exude that language and to say, I am the truth. And all these things, like theists claim that God has a voice. How can God have a voice if he doesn't have any corporeality? He doesn't have parts.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a contradiction.
It's not a contradiction. It's so I didn't say it was a contradiction. It's not a logical contradiction.
Maybe
It's
an
just
impossibility.
it's
Um,
it's implausible. So it's like
yeah,
evidentially
I wouldn't.
improbable. It's
I
almost
wouldn't
not
think.
possible.
That the argument is that he exists outside of time and space. You can make the analogy with the quantum field. So something that exists, maybe timeless and immaterial. And I mean, I don't see the problem.
No.
I mean, it's a problem ascribing a mind to it that it can be. There's not the necessity of it to be a material for us to have the laws of logic.
But what I'm saying is like they hold, especially Chris, since he's a classical theist, they would say God doesn't have any parts. If he has no parts, then he's non-corporal. He has no body. If he has no body, then what is he then? Is he just like a mind that is just there statically and it conceives of language, right? It thinks of language, but it can't like exude the words out since it's not physical in nature. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but everything is possible in the supernatural, of course. You can justify everything with an all-powerful and eternal God. So don't fight much about it. I mean, we're not going to disagree in that sense, but I'm just saying that the same properties that a quantum field has, one can ascribe them to a God. So it's not necessary to be material. But yeah, we're not. I'm not gonna argue much about
Like
why.
language.
Yeah. Have you read the Meditations by Descartes?
Yeah.
I was reading it the other day, and I mean it's kind of confusing for me because I haven't read that much philosophy in my life. But yeah, as you said, it will be interesting to see a debate where someone takes the position of Descartes, where he's with his cogito, he was trying to prove the existence of God. I mean, I didn't understand it much, but it will be interesting to see a debate about the cogito with Descartes' position and Tom's position.
Yeah. So I think the the point of that debate would be, is the cogito, so does the cogito lead to God? And Tom would
Yeah,
say no, because Tom would say it's just a statement about our existence and it's not positing anything ontological. So that statement, I think, therefore I am, is true regardless if there's a God or not, regardless if idealism or materialism is true. It just holds that the fact that I can reason entails that I'm real, I exist, right? It's That's what it is. You can't both think and not exist at the same time, right? Thinking would imply that you exist, but then I could imagine the theist saying, "No, no, no, that's then you had to like say why you exist and what's existence, and then it's probably going to become a rabbit hole after that." Like the same thing that Chris was doing when he was trying to during the debate. He said that the cogito is an assertion about one's existence, and if it's an assertion about one's existence, then that implies that Tom knows, and if Tom knows about his existence, then that leads back to ontology and epistemology.
mm,
And Tom was saying, no, I don't care about what your epistemology is. He's just saying that he knows that he can experience things. It's as simple as that. But they want to like create 300 page word syllogisms as to why that's an assumption.
yeah. There's I was reading the other day the Wikipedia page from Cogito Ergo Sum, and there's a argument I think from Kierkegaard where he says that he assumes the I. Mm, um, I shouldn't, but yeah, it basically said that well, it says that Nietzsche also says that the I is presupposed, but it can be this problem can be avoided if you reformulate the argument by saying something exists. Wait, how is it? Well, maybe I'm
So
terrible.
is the argument that something that's non-thinking could also exist, or is it saying that
That the I is presupposed.
that the I presupp so If that's the case, then yeah, the I alone presupposes existence. The I, the noun in the sentence already
Yeah.
presupposes it. So saying am is just like a violation of Occam's razor because it's multiplying entities upon necessity. You're just saying the same thing twice but in different words. So the I already implies existence, so you don't need the am. You see what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah.
saying subjective opinion. That's like a redundant way to say try to convey something. All opinions are by definition subjective. So you don't need to say subjective opinion. You could just say opinion. It's saying the same thing twice but in different words. It's called just well in language they use it as it's called a tautology.
Yeah.
But in philosophy it could just be like I think there's a word for it, but I'm not sure. It's a redundant statement. Brian Brian is Grandmaster. You know, it's in my name. It's redundant. You don't need to go beyond that.
Yeah.
Who wanted to bet like $20 going into this debate that when TJump said that reality is real, that he was going to repeat that 20 times. So take watch the debate and then take a shot every time TJump says cogito or I think therefore I am or reality is real. Just you're gonna have to replace your liver the next day.
Yeah, that sounds like an overdose.
That's not. Yeah, I'm gonna overdose, big time. No, and
The Wikipedia page is quite extensive. I would like to understand it and read all the invitations. Maybe when I do, we can have a further discussion about it.
I want to debate on the problem of evil, or the just any not only the problem of evil, the problem of helpless suffering. Paul Draper's argument from pain and pleasure. There's so many arguments that the theists don't care to address when it comes to the issue of suffering and evil. Because then they'll just say, well, Adam and Eve, or free will, or best of all possible worlds, Like, I want to hear new objections to these guys. So philosophy is not argument ad nauseum. You don't just like repeat a point and think that's an ultimate defeater of a position. I don't think to now. I don't think there's been one solid response to the problem of evil. Not one. I don't think the free will objection is even good. Because I could just say, well, even if free will exists, God still intervenes in the universe as a personal creator, right? So is he too ignorant to intervene within free will? They would probably say, well, no, it's part of his like grand plan for him not to intervene into our affairs because we have moral responsibility, which is jargon to say that we have the ability to choose the good or the evil, and that determines our fate. And God knows where He's going, where we're going, even if we have choice, which also sounds incoherent to me.
You are referencing the Epicurean paradox?
Omniscience and free will. So imagine God, you're playing chess with God, and then God allows you to choose how you're going to move around your pawns, right? He lets you, right? You have that autonomy, but he foreknows what action you're going to take before you even do it, right? I've seen that argument go up, but again, the theistic position holds that I'm a creation of Him, right? He is the necessary being. So there's not one thing that could happen in the realm of free will that wouldn't go exactly as He planned it to be. So it's not genuine free will. Because, okay, I could still decide whether I want to move the pawn one direction or another, right? But He's designed it so that He knows, regardless of how I'm going to move the pawn, how I'm going to move it. So it's like, it's everything that happens necessarily in a way that conforms to God's plan. And that view, in my opinion, is incompatible with free will, because, or at least the libertarian version of free will, where our wills are not determined by prior causes. If everything in this realm is according to God's plan, then that means that God caused this world in such a way where it necessitates His plan. Everything goes as He wants it to be, or as He expects it to be. Because if it doesn't go as He expects it to be, then why call Him a God, right? If he's not fulfilling his plan, then you wouldn't call Him a God. So a God, by definition, is a being that fulfills His plan necessarily. So how can you use that view but then also mix in free will? What the fuck? Free will is detached from that necessitarian view of God and how the universe works, if He exists. You see what I'm saying? So either you believe that the will is completely uncaused and we work in a spontaneous way, or God is omniscient, but He created a necessary world where every action that I could take, I couldn't do otherwise. That's a real paradox.
Yeah, that it's similar to the Epicurean paradox.
Epicurean is more like Epicurean is stronger because it's more intuitive, and it you can explain it to the average person and it'll just like connect. Whereas the terms that we're using right now to describe omniscience / free will is more complicated. The issue with evil, though, I would revise it. It's not that evil exists. It's that to the extent that it exists in the world. So you wouldn't you wouldn't expect an omnibenevolent being to be so indifferent to the amount of evil in the world, right?
Yes, some people argue that maybe he's not benevolent. Maybe he's an evil god or something.
That's a
Um,
possibility.
that's like a not Christian view, but
It's
well, maybe if you took the Old Testament, it is a Christian view because he's a complete asshole in the Old Testament. But the problem is that an impersonal God, and which does not intervene, or it's not, it's not,
a deist
it makes
god.
him,
Yeah.
it does not make himself known. It's not different from one that does not exist. So there's no difference between something that does not exist and something that cannot be that does not intervene or that we cannot see or show in any manner. So that's a real problem that maybe he's an evil god, but maybe he's not the Christian god, but not different. It's not. It doesn't make any difference if he is evil or he does not exist. So I mean, you can spend years debating why Christianity is wrong, or the existence of a god. It's kind of, I mean, it's interesting for a couple of years, but it gets tiresome.
I find it
So
fascinating, and especially ethics. The problem of evil is so fascinating because it's just it's just something that not only that they hold, so it's like a critique of the assumptions that their worldview makes, but it also appeals to the moral intuition of like everyday people who go through suffering and evil on a daily basis and of a great amount. So I think Epicurus was right in how he tried to view like, well, there's a trilemma here. So there's a triangle. One side you hold that he's omnipotent, the other side you hold that he's omnibenevolent, and at the top of the triangle evil exists. So how do you reconcile that? So I would revise it and I would actually say it's not that evil existing does not um, make the omnipotent, omnibenevolent God hypothesis impossible. Because I could argue that even if God has the intentions of eliminating all evil in the world, um, you could say he you can probably make a decent argument as to he necessitates it because we can learn from our experiences and do good afterwards. After we commit evil, we learn from our mistakes, and then from that experience, we can do good or learn to be virtuous. But the problem is not that evil exists; is that there's more evil than good, and the scale on which to understand this is that the pendulum is all the way on the side of evil, and there's very little good in the world, right? So why couldn't God balance that pendulum? Why couldn't he? And this would actually be easier for him, because if he balances that pendulum, then that will give the motivation for his so-called creation to develop a personal relationship with him, because the world would have an equal balance of light and darkness. If the majority of things that you see in the world is absolute evil, then what is that going to give you an impression of at the beginning? Well, yeah. Um, what kind of a world is this that got created? I mean, this isn't the best of all possible worlds. It's an imbalanced world. It's inconsistent. You have much more evil than good, but supposedly he's omnibenevolent. So what why doesn't he intervene to uh, make it so that there's much more good than evil? That's my argument, basically. Uh, it's the amount of evil that exists which makes uh, the God hypothesis improbable. At least the Christian God, right? So this is called the evidential argument of evil. The amount of evil makes God improbable, whereas the logical problem says that it's impossible logically that evil exists and that an omnipotent, omnibenevolent being exists at the same time. Two different approaches.
Someone told me that it was impossible for God to make a world without suffering. What do you think about that? Because
No,
I think
no.
it's definitely possible for God to make a world without suffering. I think that's
If he's not, if he's
What's
not
the
that powerful.
why can't he create a world? Heaven exists. There's no suffering in heaven as far as I'm aware of, theoretically. So why couldn't he create a world where there's no suffering? What? I mean, they would say like sentience doesn't work in a way where the only thing that you can experience is happiness or suffering, right? They would make that justification for their claim that God couldn't have created a world where there's no suffering. But then if they hold that claim, then that defeats their heaven worldview, because that worldview is literally so much happiness that you can drink Kool-Aid rivers and be eternally happy, right? And there's no suffering in heaven at all. So that claim, either they make the claim that God can't create a world without suffering, or if they hold that he can, right? Then why heaven, right? So, and there's also no free will in heaven, because the only experience that you have is happiness. And if the results only yield one way, then that entails that the way you got to that result was just imposed upon your will, so that you could only do that thing or only experience that thing and not anything else. Because if there's choice, then that if there's choice, and that yields different results. We know this. This is literally TJump's argument, where a moral God would give people the option to opt out of this universe and go to a universe where they're autonomous. Not that they're happy, right? but that they're autonomous. Autonomy is more important than happiness. So yeah, that's Frank. Who gave you this argument? Was this Ray Comfort or something like this? This is bullshit.
This was some guy on Discord. His name
Yeah,
was Slubbergully, something like that.
oh yeah. I mean, with that name alone, I could tell like where his arguments are gonna go. Just it's such a man. I don't know why theists do this thing where they think that the world that we live in was the best choice for God. I don't understand that. I don't think there is ultimately a best choice for God. I think God ultimately, since um he could actualize any potential, there's not one thing that he could do that can completely satisfy him. Do you see what I'm saying? So he works in a way that if he's satisfied, then that entails that he's conformant with what he's done. And if he's conformant with what he's done, then that would entail that, you know, he wouldn't have the motivation to create something even better, right? It's the lazy God argument. So he's satisfied up to the point where he accepts what he created, right? And he doesn't bother to care on creating another reality because he thinks that this is the best world possible. Um, so that there's that, right? There could be a lazy God, but there could be a God that's never satisfied. So he's just maybe he created some world um through his omnipotence, but he hasn't revealed to us yet what that world is. And he didn't reveal this world to us in the Bible. That's also a possibility. Why couldn't God create a world B that's unknown to us through revelation? Maybe he didn't reveal that part to us. That's possible. Why do they think that this is the best of all possible worlds? There could be a world where um precepts don't exist, and that'd be a better world than this one. Anyways, uh,
And you can find an infinite.
yeah, jokes aside, like I don't buy best possible worlds argument.
You can find an infinite amount of problems with the proposition of God, especially the Christian God. I mean, it's kind of a waste of energy, in my opinion. I mean, I argue about it too, but not too much because it's very easy to find every objection to every proposition. Every argument has been, how do you say it, debunked.
Well, no. Not every argument, because the thing that people do nowadays, especially on the internet, is that they take a worldview that they research and they think, oh, so and so said this. I'm just gonna like read 3 pages, misinterpret the whole thing, and then say, oh, look, I found a problem. Debunked. Next. No. That's people thinking that they're debunking. That's what I call the armchair philosophers. That's the people who like B33, who thinks that Hume thought that the moon could exist one day but not the other because induction has problems. Like, that's literally how dumb he is. That's a misconstrued view of Hume. And people do this all the time with other philosophers. They misconstrue the view in order to fit their worldview. Or maybe they attribute some quote and from some guy in order to prove their point when that guy who said it doesn't even hold that position. Like how right wingers, they quote Orwell when Orwell was a socialist, and Orwell, yeah.
Well, I'm mostly talking about theistic arguments, theistic interpretations. It's very easy to find a video or some page that fuck my English. I forgot many words.
So what are you saying? Like what type of theist arguments? Like cosmological?
Like everyone?
Oh, like everyone.
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, it is for me kind of a waste of energy to try to argue something that has already been analyzed and investigated. Well, maybe it has been examined by philosophers throughout the centuries. Someone said,
ontological arguments are really dumb. Like, I would agree on you on that. I wouldn't waste my energy on any ontological argument because it boils down to semantics.
Almost every argument is a form of a special pleading fallacy, or an argument from ignorance, or
an argument from silence. Yeah, an argument from silence is where you say that your worldview or your claim is correct because the opposition doesn't have any evidence or justification for their worldview. Which is similar to like the whole atheism, like the debate that just happened. That's an argument from silence. Atheism has no justification for knowledge. Therefore, God. No. That's doesn't work that way. Yeah, we might have no justification, but so what? How does that prove that your worldview is correct? It's like you said, it's a form of argument from ignorance.
Yeah. Isn't it also the gas fallacy? Like inserting God into the questions we don't know, don't yet have the answers to, so you just insert God, and then
that's God of the gaps. Yeah, that you just like you had like imagine any explanation of the universe like a slot machine, and then God is like the coin that you just always slide in for everything. So how does this this is like the whole fine tuning, like it looks the world, it looks so pretty and it's so complex, and and the human body, it's so complex that can't come from chance. No way, right? It had to be created by something complex, some complex thing with a mind, right? They have the arrogance to even think that it's a mind. It could be created, but easily without a mind, or it could emerge from an, like we were talking earlier, like the cause of the universe could be immaterial, spaceless, timeless, but mindless. But they have the arrogance to think that it has a mind. How do you know? How did you come to that knowledge claim? That's the problem. That's the problem, especially with those type of arguments. I could just say there's simplicity in the universe, right? And like um, trees, right? They're complex in function. They're complex in structure, right? So a tree consists of many parts, right? It has a root, the branches, the leaves, etc. Um, but it doesn't function, right? It's simple. It doesn't walk. It doesn't. So for every complex thing you observe, you posit a God. Then for every simple thing that you observe, you have to posit a God, right? So if you posit a God, then that God is both simple and not simple at the same time. That's their argument, in a way. You can see why I'm talking the way I am. I don't buy it.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, when you know a little bit about logical fallacies, many arguments fall apart. So I really don't spend much energy discussing these things because it's kind of obvious when it is a fallacy. I mean, if you like to discuss them by all means, it's just
Not, yeah,
kind of
it's just it's just the obvious. I mean, you don't even have to like bend your brain.
it's kind of tiresome after some time.
One topic should be talked about is physicalism. Well, he's done that, right? Yeah, he's done that. Physicalism versus idealism. I don't know,
I would like
something
to.
new.
I would like to see a IQ and race discussion because talked about it in some Sunday discords.
IQ and
But
race.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
Like different races
but
have different IQs, right?
yeah, and it's quite a controversial topic. So it will be very fun to see him discuss this with someone.
You should discuss it with Vosh, just
If
for
I
entertainment value.
if I could find Razor Core, the guy that usually joins up and is a racist, I would set that debate up. I don't know what the
I
title would
It's
be.
a
mean,
waste of time.
I
He's gonna be
mean,
so bad faith that I mean,
Tom argues that there is a difference, that the concept of race is not just a concept but an
it's a biological, it's physical, it's
yeah,
tangible. Yeah.
maybe if he discusses with a racist, maybe they will both end in the same conclusion. So it will have to be someone who thinks that race is just a social construct and that IQ it's not um, real or
Why is
not
that
even
even a
close.
debate? That's so obvious. Race is something biological, and IQ can be empirically measured. It's not a social construct. These are things that have been verified in science through peer reviewed papers, and there have been experiments made repeatedly on IQ. It's a real thing. What do they even mean by social construct? Like like sure, definitions for what intelligent entails is subjective. So those things, yeah, if that's what if that's what they mean,
I
okay,
mean,
sure. But
it's not
it's measurable.
it's
So it's not completely a construct of your mind. It's
the
something that
problem
exists
with
in reality.
the problem with IQ is that it only measures your mathematical or logical
Pattern
um,
recognition
abilities.
and
Yeah, but
logical
it,
reasoning.
is- the argument is that intelligence is much more than just that. In that case, I could agree that intelligence is not just pattern recognitions or mathematical ability. And that is the objection that IQ is not only IQ tests are not only the sole measure of intelligence.
Well, then that would have to boil down to um, just a disagreement as to what intelligence is defined as, or what to what extent it exists. Like you, like someone can be brilliant at chess, but be an absolute fucktard on how to build a house. There's people like that.
Yeah,
Um, but so what? I could just confine my definition of intelligence as pattern recognition and logical reasoning. You could be inept at building a house, but if you're good at logic and pattern recognition, then you have a high IQ. So it's
and
gonna be a meaningless debate because they have their own axioms as to what intelligence entails, and the other person is gonna have their own axioms. It's like two people disagreeing on what the definition of morality is. The question is not whether it's measurable, right? You could measure some moral actions as constituting more happiness or things like that. You can you can measure uh, morality in a sense based off of the results it yields, right? But the definitions of it are subjective. It's the same thing here. It's like um, IQ is a concept that didn't exist before man, right? So in a sense, it's man-made. But just because it's man-made doesn't mean that it's entirely a social construct. You can still arrive at objective calculations through that subjective framework. That's still possible. It's like if I hold that the most moral action is that which constitutes the more laughs in the room, right? Then I can objectively determine that someone like Darth Dawkins is the most immoral person ever because he makes no one laugh under my definition of morality. So that's what I'm saying. The debate is it's not going to go anywhere. They're going to disagree on the definition, and
well, maybe they
definitions
can
are
argue.
useless.
Maybe they
What?
can argue about the concept of race. Then it's not IQ, just the concept of race.
Okay, that's better, but still, like, uh,
There's
there's gonna
I
be ad
have
homs, and there's gonna be slandering, and there's gonna be, you white supremacist fuck. How could you believe that race is biological, you Nazi? Let's cancel you. Like that's happened to
yeah.
non-racist, reasonable people before. So that's why I find the whole thing disingenuous. And it always leads back to politics. That's the other thing. It's kind of almost inescapable to talk about that without mentioning politics. And politics is bullshit.
I sometimes read the articles in Wikipedia, although it's not a quite reliable source. And the first paragraph in the race and intelligence page says that further complicating the issue, modern science has shown race to be a social construct rather than a biological reality, and intelligence has no agreed upon definition. So the problem is that this does not, it has not, how do you say, citation. And I mean, and I'm somewhat confused about this because.
Well, so, um, what was so? Have you read the book, the Bell Curve, or have you like read a synopsis of it? Because
Okay.
that's gonna be a fundamental part of the discussion. So in
I
that book,
mean,
it argues
which book?
that
Sorry, I disconnected for a
so I
accident.
was arguing that in the book, the Bell Curve, which is probably going to be mentioned by the race realist position.
Yeah.
It not only argues that there are differences in IQ between the races, the differences in IQ between the races yields environmental results like job performance or employment. So the low IQ race would incline to be uh, less employed, underemployed, or unemployed in comparison to any of the members in the high IQ race, which they contend or they posit that it's mostly white males that have the highest IQ. So, like, the argument is race is genetic, right? That should be obvious. Um, there's genetical differences in IQ between the races, and those genetical differences between IQ they yield socioeconomic results. So the low IQ will tend to be less educated, not employed, poor, and the high IQ tend to be like rich, educated, you know, people, basically.
Yeah, the
That's
same.
the book. That's the book simplified. Obviously, it's more
Yeah,
complex than that, but that's just like uh, the main meat. That's the meat and potatoes of the book, basically.
the same page about race and intelligence gives a critique about that book. Well, there are many critiques about the bell curve. I haven't read it. And there's also a page called Scientific Racism, which also mentions, I mean, these Wikipedia pages are like
Bias.
15, 15 pages long. And yeah, I may argue that a little bit biased. I'm quite ignorant about the topic, but it really interests me, not for
Like,
racist reasons, but for scientific reasons. I would like
for
to know.
objectivity. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, in the page it says that you cannot edit the page until November of this year, and it's quite suspicious.
I wonder why. I
uh,
mean, you could just go to
that
like the parody Wikipedia. You could go to encyclopedia and just like write, no, this is like okay, don't do that. But I'm saying like you could just go to like encyclopedia and just like edit whatever you want in there and source nothing
uh,
about it. Um,
my my principal objection is that we can identify race in every species, but we are hesitant to do it in our own. And I think it is a bias, as you said, principal, mostly because the inequality that these concepts maybe they give ammunition to racist people. But of course, it is better
no, yeah,
to
I
know.
see what you're saying, but I see what you're saying, but mis it's it's the wrong way to look at the debate because the debate is a scientific inquiry, and so scientific inquiries are outside of morality. So just because even granting race realism is true, that doesn't entail an obligation for someone to be racist, right? You
Of
don't,
course,
of course. So, but people take it as if the people take it as if race realism were to be revealed as true, then that gives like moral ammunition to racists, right?
yeah,
There's like this thing in their psyche which says, um, the fact that race is real entails that they're going to be motivated to act in a racist way in the future.
yeah,
I
that we
don't know.
should discriminate or something. I
Okay,
mean,
but
it is,
that's stupid logic because for example, I know life sucks, but that doesn't entail me to kill myself. I mean, I'm still here.
yeah. I
So
mean,
just because
that's a debate that I would like to see between Tom and someone that does not hold this position.
yeah, so just the fact that you know something, even if it's something about yourself or it's something that exists external to yourself, doesn't necessarily obligate you to follow that fact. So the universe doesn't care what you value, doesn't care what you hold in your brain, doesn't care this how your brain is structured. Um, the facts are what they are, and they're going to stay that way regardless of what you value. So, thinking that if race realism was true, that would suddenly, like, well, in a sense, they're right because there are people like that, that they do um, apply the facts into their moral lives,
Yeah,
but it's not
that's a
necessarily
problem.
true. That's what I'm saying. So you don't have to avoid the debate because it's not necessarily true that just because race realism is true that that's going to obligate you to be a racist. It's true based off of like person to person, but it's not true like for everyone. So you can still have the debate and
And
reach some objectivity.
if you guys could suggest some debate like that, I would love to see it.
I don't know. The mods would have to ask TJump. I think um I don't like I don't want to speak for TJump, but um I know if he does a debate like that, that would probably benefit his channel more than right now because people for some reason are interested more in like things like the algorithm might predict as politics related, like race, and that would give him views. That would give him lots of views, and that would like bolster his prominence on YouTube. That's just my because right now with debating precepts, it's the content is stale. He's growing, but the content is stale, and he still gets a lot of views, but he could get a lot more views if he talked like something that's more uh, politics related.
Sure.
Not saying that the topic is fundamentally political. It's not, but people view it like it is. That's why a lot of people talk about it, and they'll be interested to see what if TJump ever debates someone on that. I mean, it could be anyone from here. I mean, I could debate that. I could take either side, right? But the issue is like getting people to debate and um, keeping things charitable. It's an emotional topic for some people, so yeah.
I
Yeah,
miss
I
you.
understand. I have to go, but I'm glad we had this talk, and maybe we can continue it later.
Maybe no, it will, okay? Because necessary existence. Remember that.
Sure.
All right, take care.
Okay.
Take care.
You too, man. See ya.
Grandmaster Brian, what was the topic you said you debate on T Jump on either side?
Um, race realism or race anti-realism. So I can debate either one. So I if T Jump is I don't know what's his position on it. But either position, I'll take the alternative and I'll debate him on it if he's interested.
That sounds like a good one. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
he's a race realist. I think he is, but I would have to check.
I would like to debate him eventually on meta ethics. I think that'd be interesting too.
Meta ethics?
So I would challenge some of his assumptions for objective morality. Um, Number one being that the moral progress that he cites, um, it's it's a view that makes objective morality improbable in the sense that um, just because our psyche evolves to view things, um, view certain actions immoral over time, like slavery, like we don't hold the same beliefs that we did for slavery in the time of the Civil War. Um, that's a fact, sure, but that fact doesn't entail that um, we're obligated to follow moral progress. So morality is something inherently prescriptive. It has to be either suggestive or has to be something imperative, like a command. Um, just saying that another example, just saying that there's an involuntary imposition of the will and that you could define morality in that some way. Well, I would argue that um, trying to create such a world where um, that desired best possible world that he has of no involuntary action. I think that could only be arrived through involuntary action in some sense. So I use the analogy of the how to stop violent murder as an example. Um, the only way to consequentially decrease the amount of involuntary action is to um, go against those people's will, in a sense. So the the murderer doesn't consent necessarily to my imprisonment of him, right? He doesn't consent to me locking him in a cell. Um, but yet that action would yield a more voluntary society, paradoxically. So there's an issue with how he would phrase his view, like the elimination of all involuntary imposition of the will. I think that's impossible because the only way that you could get there is through imposing on the will of the people who commit the coercive acts, right? If we define consent as, you know, permissiveness or something like that, then by definition, um, a murderer does not ask for his imprisonment when he kills someone else. That's not what a murderer would ask for. But yet, this involuntary action on the murderer is necessary to yield a more voluntary society. Uh, so that's a paradox for him. How would he account for such a world? And I could think of ways that are moral actions to take, but that are also coercive, like the old lady crossing the street example. Would you push her against her will in order to from save her from being hit by a car? I personally would. I would push her away. It doesn't matter if she didn't ask for it, right? Because existence is better than non-existence.
Right. But under Tom's morality, though, it's isn't he describing the best of all possible worlds where like the imposition of will would be eliminated at that point? So, because I mean, I understand like what you're saying, like you're
But that's a
imposing.
hypothetical, Frank.
Right, right, right.
That's like his imagined world. I'm saying if he holds objective morality, then the objective isn't some hypothetical. It's something that can be implied and can be measured and tangible, right? So it has to be arrived at in a way. It can't just be like some postulation. I could just say like the most objectively moral world is where um I get all the hoes and get all the money, right? That's the most moral world because it makes me the happiest. Um, I don't care, right? Like objectivity would have to deal with how is this moral desire that he has, how is that attainable in a world? How can you put that into being? If he finds a way to do that, then he wins because he would falsify my objection. I'm saying my objection is that no, he can't. He can't arrive at a world where he eliminates the imposition of the will without imposing on other people's will. you know, it's you have to coerce the coercers in order to bring about a more voluntary society, in a sense. Um, and the fact that that paradox
Yo
exists,
fue el
that
internet,
that
chequea.
puts a barrier
Todavía no ha
for
llegado.
being objective because it can't be realized. It can't be realized. It can't be put into being. So it's not just a matter of what Tom values. It's what Tom values and whether if Tom values something that is applicable in the real world. That's what I'm saying.
So, it like if I were to set up a debate, like maybe Tom's objective morality on trial or something like that, would you be interested in participating?
Sure. I'll take the anti-realist position. So just like instead of saying object Tom's morality on trial, make it like um has Tom arrived at objective morality? Question mark. Like that. So I'll take the negative position if that debate ever happens.
All right, that sounds like a good one. Well, I'm just thinking of different ideas. So I know Waveless is on a mission too. So I've been, by the way,
So
I've
you
been recording
can
this.
just
So
ask him about that because
yeah, I
I'll
will.
be absolutely willing.
So wait, the
And I
question
think that'd
is.
be fun.
The question is. Can you repeat the question one more time so I can copy it down?
What question? Sorry, I like have bad short term memory. Like
No,
what was
like what the debate title would be.
has Tom arrived at objective morality? Or does Tom theory prove objective morality? Question mark.
Has Tom proven objective morality? Okay, I can work with
Has
that.
Tom proven objective morality?
See, but he doesn't claim he's proven it though. So it's like I don't know.
Okay, Tom's moral theory on trial, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So
Let's just
so,
go
so
trial.
like questioning his theory.
Right, that works. Yeah. By the way, I've been recording this, so just to let you guys know. So, hopefully, we can start recording
Like recording what exactly?
the
Like
conversation.
this convo or
Yeah, the conversation.
oh this conversation that we're having?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean
I
that's okay.
Yeah, it's on the YouTube
I've
page.
yeah, I'm used to hearing my voice on YouTube.
Yeah,
I cringe.
I have a problem with my voice. Yeah, it's cringe, dude. Like I heard myself on the Foxy debate, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I sound terrible. Oh
Well, it's just that the audio processing is different when you go to upload. And so YouTube has this like crappy thing now where like um it alters the sound of the original video just for like presentation purposes. So you could like for example, you could make like a song in like a bass boosted song, and then when you hear it on YouTube it doesn't sound the same way you heard it when you first uploaded it. I don't know, YouTube need to fix their shit.
Yeah, I've been asking people on other servers, Franks, to see if I could get some people. There's this one guy who I think is interested in debating socialism. I haven't gotten a response from the dude who was a fascist or anything, but figured that might really be interesting to hear.
That's a good one. We were talking about it, and Grandmaster Brian and Levi were talking about it, and they're a little tired of the precept argument because it's been done so many times. But it's kind of impossible because almost everybody on Discord who's a Christian or a theist uses some form of precept. You know,
Yeah,
it's rare for you to find
it,
somebody who doesn't.
it's easy to intellectually posture behind. That's really what it is. I feel
It's the
like.
easiest. It's the easiest form of what do you call it? Of like whatever you call like theism or Christianity. I mean, it's the easiest argument you can defend, honestly, because it's just questioning someone's grounding for like all these different things. So
Well,
No, it's not even the best argument. It's the most useless one because the atheist doesn't have any grounding to begin with. They don't believe that they should have a grounding. They don't care.
yeah, but they will say they do though. So and then ask you how you
Okay, but
ground it.
but
You
I
know,
mean,
I mean, I disagree with it, but
so what? I mean, like again, atheism does not need a grounding for knowledge because we deny the metaphysical. We deny the existence of gods or any god by that matter. So you need to separate epistemology from ontology. Ontology is not needed for epistemology. Ontology leads to epistemology, but epistemology doesn't need ontology. I could justify the laws of logic and how I know them because their negation would lead to a contradiction, right? I know them. I know they apply modally. What now? I don't need I don't need a precondition for that because my knowledge of the laws of logic could just be a brute fact. It's something that I know, but I don't need a further explanation for knowing it.
so quantum foam actually was. I was talking to him and his like DMs, and I was talking to him about like the pre-sub argument in general, and I said um, how one of my favorite things is to get them to acknowledge their circularity. And it's a bit too obvious, and it's a big issue. And all they offer is an agent. And he goes, their next question is always, do you reject all forms of circular reasoning? And since I take the axiom route, I can say yes. Then they will attempt to reformulate the precept as an axiom, and then I will point out that they also share my axioms. That my axioms are prior to their axiomatic assumptions of the existence of God. Hence, it's an additional axiom, and we should aim for as few as possible. And I was going to see what you thought about that response.
Um, so I don't think they understand how epistemology works. Uh, Literally every framework that you could think of, every worldview has some baseline assumptions. These are called axioms. Mathematics works the same way, physics works the same way. You can't construct any knowledge claim without a prior assumption. That's a fact. Um, I could just posit that reality is the grounding for my knowledge. That's my base assumption. I presuppose reality. Reality is the grounding for my knowledge. Um, that completely dismantles the notion that we have no grounding. I could just say the universe is the grounding for it, because everything that I could ever experience or know correlates to the universe in some way. So I can't know something external to where I'm located within the universe. I'm in this universe, and I know I exist in the universe. Therefore, the universe is the fundamental truth of my knowledge. What's the issue? That's an ontological explanation there, right? It's circular, yes. It leads back to my assumption, but just because it's circular doesn't mean it's necessarily invalid. It's just the same type of presupposition they would make for God, right? But in different letters and different words. At the end of the day, I don't buy that argument, because the same assumptions they could make for God, I could make for nature. I could say everything that I could know about my existence, or everything I could know about logic, for example, is known through in the realm of nature. I can't know it outside of nature, or at least I haven't known it yet. So that's all I have for my grounding. Replace God with nature, and then boom, you have a grounding, even if you deny the metaphysical.
What if they ask a question like, how do you know that the grounding is nature, like physical? What if they were to ask that question? Because I can definitely see them
Because
asking.
because because I understand, I am certain that I have a finite brain, I have finite knowledge, and I could only have finite knowledge within a finite world, and that finite world is the physical world, the world where everything will decay over time. I cannot know something outside of the physical world. Simple. Because see, they um if you want to make the argument, if you want to try to tackle my argument, you're gonna have to like prove that reason is not a part of nature. I hold that it is. I think that you could perfectly explain how reason could emerge from matter. There's no contradiction involved in that. If there's no contradiction involved in reason coming from matter, then it's not impossible to the contrary, like Chris says, because I already have a grounding for how reason came into existence, right? It came through non rational means. Um, the synapses firing in my brain right now can't form propositions themselves, but they allow me the ability to understand propositions, right? So, um, my ability to understand logic doesn't need to come from a source that's also logical. Synapses and dendrites in my brain, they aren't logical. They don't work in a logical way. They don't. They don't have minds of their own. They don't rationalize, but yet they are what make my brain understand logic. So I would argue that the grounding that I have for knowledge is my neurochemistry. Where does my neurochemistry come from? Well, obviously from my biology. Where does biology come from? Well, from nature. And I'd also make the point that logic is a language that we've evolved and formalized in order to describe existence as it is. And language is something fundamentally uh, physical. It's something in nature. It's something that, well, language itself is not physical, but it comes from the physical. That's the evidence that I would give for it.
What about that question of like you already know God exists. You're just suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. You heard that one?
No, I'm not suppressing the truth because I have something called science.
See, because I always figured like regardless of what your starting point is, you have to reason to God. But they say that you don't reason to God, you reason from God. So it's almost backwards, you know? Like I always thought you had to reason to God, like you found out about God and you start worshiping him. But theirs is completely opposite.
So they don't understand how language works. They don't understand how logic works. Um, all the evidence so far in contemporary linguistics shows that language is uh, something that's innate in our biological species. You don't believe me? Research universal grammar um, theory by Noam Chomsky. Um, yeah, language is an evolved trait that that is used in order to serve certain evolutionary purposes, like uh, producing more offspring. That's one beneficial point that the development of language had. Another beneficial point is how we managed to use language in order to create advanced societies that are also prosperous. Um, and that also accounts for our survival in a sense. Uh, you could explain the purpose of knowledge just fine without a god, and you could also explain where it comes from just fine without a god. So how can that same thing could apply for logic? Logic is a language. It's used to describe um, concepts. Um, Concepts imply a mind, and the mind isn't separate from our nature. And the mind that I have is not separate from the nature I'm experiencing in this world. Uh, yeah, so I have a grounding. There's no more arguments to give. I have a grounding.